Hello guys, welcome back. In today's video, we're looking at data normalization. What is data normalization? Data normalization is a process of structuring a relational database to reduce redundancy and ensure data integrity. Hold on, that's grammar. Let's simplify it. What is data normalization again? Data normalization is a process of organizing your data in a structured manner just to make it more cleaner, to make it more easy to use and ready to use, to make it more efficient. It involves organizing your data into tables and defining relationship between them based on some normalization rules. Just think of it as you trying to tidy up a messy environment or a messy room. Right? So what is the goal of data normalization? The goal is that you are trying to eliminate duplicates from your data. You are trying to make sure you are organizing or separating pieces of data into their own space. Like example, you're trying to separate customer details from other details from regional details and the likes. Then the last thing is just for you to be able to maintain your data and to reduce that risk of finding inconsistency in your data. Now we have two rules of data normalization. Before we go to that, hold on. Because I defined the first one, I said is grammar, doesn't mean that you should not take note of those keywords. In fact, interviewers, keywords like reduce redundancy, keywords like ensure data integrity are key things that interviewers want to hear you say when they ask you questions around data normalization. So please note that just for clarity, don't throw that away. Yeah, hold it. Okay, the rules of data normalization. The first rule states that every values and attribute should have its own column in a table. Then the second rule states that every column describing another column should not be in that same table but in a separate table. So looking at the first rule, which is that every attribute and values must have their own columns, we're going to be looking at one part, which is unpivoting and pivoting of our columns in Power Query. So let's check this out together. But first then, if you know you've not subscribed to my channel, please do well to hit that subscribe button so that you won't miss out on videos that will be coming next after this ones. Thank you. Let's start.
The first thing we'll be looking at is how to unpivot and pivot our data using Power Query in Microsoft Excel. Alright, as you can see here, we have a table containing order ID, some products, then we have sales and quantity for every of the month from January to April. You can see sales for January, quantity for January down to April, right? So what if you are seeing from January to December, you're seeing sales of January, quantity of January down to December. You'll be having a very, very long data with over 30 columns, if I'm not mistaken. So remember the first rule of data normalization, that every attribute or values of a table must have its own column. Every attribute or every values in a table must have its own column. As you can see that January, February, these are attributes of month. They are attributes of month. So following the first rule of data normalization, that every attribute must have its own column, it means we have to make all these attributes, January sales, quantity, January quantity, that are column headers, to be in a single column, to be on rows each. To achieve this, we are going to use the feature called unpivoting columns. What unpivoting would help us do, it would help us move the attribute as being column headers to having them in a single column. So what do I mean? Let's do that now. Check here, you can see you are seeing 10 columns, then 30 rows. So I'm going to unpivot this. First, I'm going to start with the one for sales. I'm going to unpivot all the columns that contains for January sales, February sales, March sales, and April sales. So I'll press on my control key or control button on my system, select January sales, select February sales, select March sales, and select April sales. Then I'll go to my transform tab, click on transform tab. Inside the any column, you see some feature here. You're saying pivot column. You see that this pivot column is in a very faint color. It means it's not active. That means you can't use it. You can't use this feature here now. So the next thing we're going to be looking at is unpivot column. This is the feature we want to use. So I'll click on the drop down button beside unpivot columns, and I'll select unpivot column. Before I select that, you can see other options: unpivot other columns and unpivot only selected columns. I can click on this only selected columns because these are the columns I selected, right? But look at, for unpivot other columns means I want to unpivot the other ones that I did not select, which is not what I want to do. So I'll just click unpivot columns. Now can you see you have all? You can see attributes, a new column called attributes, having all the attributes: the January sales, February sales, March sales, down to the last point. Then you can see the values here. All the sales under those months is now in a single column. So I'll rename this to be month, then underscore sales. Then I'll rename this to be sales. So I know this column contains sales. Then this is the attribute for it, attributes of the month for every of the sales made. So I'm going to, the next thing I want to do now is just to remove, you can see it's showing underscore sales, since this column header already indicates that it's a month for sales. So I'm just going to replace this, replace values to, so I'll replace value. And what do I want to find? I want to find anywhere you see underscore sales, replace underscore sales with just space. So I'll hit OK. Then it removes all the underscore sales from this column. So I'm going to do for the January, February, March, April quantity. So I'll select all, press down my shift button, then go to the last one and select it, then highlight everything for me. Still in the transform tab I'm in. Now click on drop down button, I'll say unpivot other columns. Can you see now? So doing the same thing I did with the first one, I'll just rename this to give me quantity. Then hit enter. I'll rename this to give me month. Then this time around underscore quantity. So let me just give it QTY quantity. So I'll replace all underscore quantity here with space, same as the first one, underscore quantity. You have to make sure that what you're finding is the same thing with what you're imputing here. Quantity, then I'll hit space and hit enter. So can you see that? Now you can see here how we reduce 10 columns into 6 columns, but now it's now longer. The row is longer than before. Before, when we were here, let's check this out. Before we unpivoted, you can see we had just 10 columns, 30 rows. But the moment you unpivoted, we now have 6 columns, 480 rows. This is for unpivoting. So for pivoting is you taking it back to its original form, you taking it back to the way it was before. So to do that, all I have to do is select the attributes that you want to make headers. So I'm starting with the month sales column. So I'll select this. This time around, you can see that the pivot column is active. It's no longer in a faint color. So I'll click on pivot column. Then the first, you can see this pivot column dialog box. Then the first thing here is, what is the value column? What is that column you want to distribute under the attribute months, the attribute of months for sales? So I'll click on the drop down button and select sales because I want sales to be under that attribute. And I'll click on OK. So can you see, to differentiate it, all I have to do now is just, I'll rename all these from January to January sales underscore sales. Then same thing for February underscore sales. Let's do for March underscore sales. Same for April underscore sales. We are done with this. So let's do for quantity too, returning back to its initial position, initial state. So I would select the column containing the attributes for the month for quantity, Then click on pivot column. Then we have this dialog box appear again. And what is the value column you want to be under the under this column? I want quantity, so I'll hit OK. Now this time, can you see we have the same? Can you see here 10 columns, 30 rows, initial state of the data has gone back to the initial state. I can now rename this back to give me, this will be underscore quantity underscore for February 2 underscore quantity, and this is for January underscore quantity, and the last one is for March underscore quantity. Can you see how we use the unpivoting and pivoting feature in Power Query here to normalize our data? Don't forget that first rule of data normalization, that every attribute or values in a data must have its own column. So anytime you're working on a data, I noticed that I've worked with data that had dates as their column headers. You'll be seeing January 2nd, 2020, February 2nd, 2020, January 25th, 2020. You see it as column headers. So in a situation like that, you know that what you have to do is to unpivot your column, because you can't leave it that way. It would disrupt your work. It doesn't make sense for you to have attribute as column headers, only if you want it to, but it doesn't make sense. So normalizing your data is very, very key. When to do that too is also key. When you need to know when to do that. I know when to do this because I can see that the attributes are made column headers, and I have to obey that first rule of data normalization. I hope you've been able to get one or two from this video. As usual, do well to practice, like, and share to someone that needs to watch this. Thank you. We'll see you in our next video.